Welcome back to the sessions on conducting literature reviews. In this second session, we will look at defining the contours of your review in terms of identifying what to include and how you go about including certain literature as part of your review. One of the first and foremost things that you got to bear in mind when you're doing a review is to get your search protocol right. This probably is the most important step when you start your review because any errors at this stage will cascade into subsequent sections of your review in terms of what literature you've identified or what literature you have not. Now, there are a few process steps I would like to touch upon when we look at the search protocol. It's very important that you define an appropriate search string. Now, it's even better if you can actually support your choice of keywords with citations from prior reviews wherever it's possible. Uh, One of the best things to do would be to first of all go back to the concepts that are in focus, define what your search parameters for each of those constructs should be, and go back and look at what other reviews have used for their search protocol. So you can back your choice of keywords with appropriate references from past literature. Now, the second aspect is to define a time period for the search. Identify what would be the best if, let's say, there hasn't been any review on this topic that has been conducted in the last 10 years, a decade. Maybe that should be your search string. If there has been an authoritative review that has been conducted, say, back 15 years ago, that probably will encapsulate or cover most of what has been uh, discussed in the literature till that date. So maybe the last 15 years, a decade and a half is what you choose as a time period for your search. So it's very important that you identify an optimal duration by looking at what earlier reviews have covered in terms of time frame. But more importantly, it's also important that you ensure that whatever you end up as a corpus of articles is manageable, something that you can actually review and not end up with say 300 or 400 articles that you'll eventually have to read through. That may become a little unmanageable for you. Now, choosing the appropriate databases, Scopus is probably one of the best databases that are out there. You, in all likelihood, will focus on peer-reviewed journal articles, and in most cases, reviews tend to avoid grey literature, although it may not be the case with all reviews. But peer-reviewed journal articles, given that it has been through peer reviews and it has been published, that generally is the focus for most reviews. Of course, there are cases when you may not be able to capture all of the journal articles, which is where you, as a last step, will look at hand searching, where you probably go on to read through some of the other databases, a Google Scholar search, so on, and citation chaining, when we talk about forward and backward citation chaining, so that your search is comprehensive and you've covered pretty much whatever has been published in that area, supporting your search string and your time period of the search. There is also yet another aspect that you need to bear in mind when you're doing a search protocol, defining the search protocol for your review, where you determine criteria in terms of what articles get included and which of those will get excluded from the final list. In terms of just clearly laying out some inclusion and exclusion criteria. Uh, One closing statement on this slide is, like I just stressed at the beginning of this slide, you have to ensure that this search protocol is absolutely robust and well justified, because any errors at this point will end up resulting in, say, identifying inadequate articles for your review, or probably even the inappropriate ones which are not fully aligned with your review, or maybe you don't capture the entire set of articles. Now, this has cascading effects for the remaining of your review process and whatever insights that you actually generate from the review. So here is an example where uh, we've identified, say, given that the focus was for fake news and hospitality, the first set of keywords which primarily focus on hospitality, and the second which focus on fake news. And yet another aspect that you may want to bear in mind is there are, in terms of ensuring that you are striking a balance between keeping the search protocol comprehensive and also addressing a manageable set of articles. There are certain keywords that you may want to search within the title of the studies, certain within the title, abstract, and the keywords of the studies, so on and so forth. Now, yet another example where the authors here, they've executed a search on Google Scholar for the keyword deepfakes that gives them a perspective on what are some of the keywords that are used alongside deepfake as a term. Let's say face manipulation, fake video, video manipulation, fake audio, and so on. And they are eventually added to the list of search terms before the actual search is executed on a Scopus or a Web of Science database. Now, where do you search for the keywords in the text? You will sometimes you will notice that there are different variants of what gets manifested within the articles, but several of them will look for these keywords within the title, abstract, or the keyword sections. We will go to Scopus and we will walk through a bit. Or there are also certain other instances where they look at it from the full text of the uh, papers. Justifying your time frame selection, we just discussed that in the first slide where we were talking about how do you justify your choice. Now, I've put in a few examples here just for the benefit of the audience. Now, in the first one, they say that they take a 10-year period, 2006 to 2017, 2015, and they argue, rather justify, that this is in line with other reviews which have been conducted in the past, and it's also a rich and fast changing scenario for SMEs, which is why they go about selecting this 10-year period. Now, the second one, Elwood et al. 2017, they talk about the date range being restricted to 1990 to 2015 so that it reflects the emergence of interest in innovation speed in general. So there is a strong justification in each of these papers that you will see where they say as to why they have chosen a specific time frame. Now, unlike this Domenico et al. 2021 paper, they say that they do not limit the search to specific years. They go up to November 2019 and they perform a very comprehensive search. Now, for a systematic review in SLR, it's crucial that you cover at least a minimum span of 10 years, going by what Paul and Criado 2020 recommend. It's always good because that way you've been very comprehensive in what you've searched for. Selecting literature, right? We spoke about some of the databases. Now, Scopus, Web of Science, EBSCO, they are the preferred sources in the social sciences discipline. However, when you look at some of the other papers, uh, there have also gone into, let's say, a Science Direct digital library. When you're looking at, say, e-governance and e-government research, there's another paper where the authors have actually relied on DGRL, Digital Government Reference Library, for e-government research. Now, familiarity with databases, right? So it's very important that you work with some of these databases and become familiar with how you navigate through it. How do you extract the data from it? Now, uh, and it's also important to understand that there are some segregations in terms of how these databases segregate, say, social sciences. Now, Scopus inclusion in social sciences, it encapsulates arts and humanities, business management and accounting, decision sciences, economics, econometrics, finance, psychology, social sciences, multidisciplinary. So when you're doing a search and filtering the search results, it's important that you select all of them when you're including or when you're focusing on social sciences. And some of this, for example, Scopus, it also incorporates results from Medline and Embase databases among some of its amongst the literature that it's able to scan through. And it also has a few research indicators for journals and articles. At this point, let's go into Scopus and look at how you can perform a basic search and an advanced search. This is something that I've just already clarified on the previous slide in terms of what are the inclusions within social sciences as a discipline that Scopus looks at. When you look at Web of Science, WOS, slightly different, which is why I've put in a snapshot from Web of Science as well. So this is what Web of Science incorporates as its classifications. Now with that, let's go into Scopus. When you are on Scopus, this is the landing page where this it'll allow you to perform a basic search. So you can either go into article title, abstract, and keywords, authors, first author, or you can just look at specific areas which you want to search through. Now, if you don't want to do this, you want to do an advanced search. When you click on advanced search, that's where it will take you, where you can, let's say, for example, I'm going to look at a very simple search string where we're looking at the title and abstract for technology and business. Now, title and abstract. So as soon as you start typing title, it'll give you all the variants. So all you need to do is just select title abstract, and you want to just look at particular phrases like technology, and use an and operator. So again, as soon as you start typing it, it will suggest what the operator should be. And business. I'm putting it in quotes because I want exactly the phrases. Of course, if you want to look at other variants like say technology, technological, etc., you may want to put a star. But that's up to you in terms of how you want to design your search protocol. And once you click on search, that's when it starts to look at its entire database. And what you find, I've already done this here for the in the interest of time. Uh, you will notice here that it's been able to pull out 1,77,000 odd documents across its search when we look at technology and business within the title and abstract. Now, here is where you may want to start filtering it. For example, there is a specific range that you may want to go for. Let's say I just decide to pick up articles from the last 5 years, 2020 to 2025. Now, if you want to just look for specific authors or subject areas, this is what we just talked about, right? So when you look at subject areas, this is where you want to go back and refer to how the classifications are done within social sciences. And for the purpose of this demonstration, I will just choose business management and accounting. However, you will have to look at arts and humanities, digital sciences. All of them have to be selected when you're doing the search. Now, I will just limit it to that. And articles, conference papers, book chapters, reviews. Maybe there is only articles that I want to look at. And source titles is the journals. So if you're looking at a specific domain, say marketing, and you want to just filter by key sources, the top marketing journals or the top HR journals or IS journals, that's where you go and filter it by source title and specific keywords that you're looking at. Now, source type is journal, English language. So I want to only filter for English language articles. And after you've done all of this, you click on limit to, which is where it now reduces your entire search, wherein you had over 1,77,000 documents into a much smaller uh, chunk of articles that you want to look at. Now, I've already performed the search. You will find that the search has resulted in 8,775 documents. So we've now significantly reduced the count, but these are all journal articles, and you at this point in time will now need to move into looking at how you want to make use of this. Now, let's say just to make it easier, now let's say if I'm just looking at 1 year, right, and I'm going to filter it. Now what I've got is 2003 articles. I will select all of them, or I will just select this page. Just to make it faster in terms of download, I will just select this page. Now I have different ways I can export it. If I just want to extract the references, I can go to a BibTeX or any other such format. Because I want to keep all of them in an Excel format, I will go, or other a CSV format, I will extract a CSV. And it's a it's a good idea. It's a good practice to pretty much export all the details associated with every article. If you want to save this as a preference, that's something you can do as well. And now you export it. So it's exporting 10 documents. Um, as soon as you open it, this is what you get, right? So you get the author names, the full names of the authors, the author IDs, the title. If you want to just start reading through the abstracts, you will also find the full abstracts over here, the keywords that I've used, the indexing keywords. Um, there is, again, of course, the funding details, so on and so forth. So this is how a basic search using Scopus is actually performed. You can do a very similar search using Web of Science as well, or even EBSCOhost. Now, you will notice that in some articles, they will, you can obviously use a Scopus, but given that they want to look at just a top journals, and what the top journals in that area have spoken about, they will filter it by focusing the search on just these top journals, like the top 10 to 20 reputed journals. So let's say if you're talking about information systems, the basket. If it's marketing, probably looking at the UTD24 or the FT50 or even the ABS or the AVDC ranked journals, so on and so forth. So that's another way by which you can filter it to very specific articles from specific journals. So, and some of the examples that that I've provided over here actually do that. So in fact, um, in this article that we have from 2018, the authors even list down what are the journals that they've focused on, just to make sure that they have got a very good high quality journal articles that are incorporated as part of the review. Familiarity with databases, we just walked through that. Now, there is also, at times, you may want to just focus on the quartiles, which is where you go to the Schemago Journal and Country Rank SJR website, where you can download the quartile rank for each journal and then limit your search to specific quartiles, typically the Q1 or maybe Q1 and Q2. So you again end up focusing on the high quality journals for articles. Quartiles, like I just said, the Q1 is occupied by the top 25% of the journals, Q2 by the next 25, Q3 the subsequent ones, and Q4 being the last set of journals, the last quartile. You can also do that within Scopus, where you can see the first quartile, second quartile, third, and the fourth, where you're looking at by the site score highest quartiles. Now, some researchers have recommended that SLRs must only consider looking at Q1 journals from Web of Science. So, but again, if your topic is not very popular, it's still in an exploratory phase where you may not find a lot of articles that have already been published, you may relax your criteria a little. You may go beyond Q1 into Q2 journals as well. Um, and the Q1 and Q2 classification of journals on Web of Science, that's also a good journal selection criteria. Of course, there are others where some people rely on country rankings and all that, but the recommendation generally is do not rely upon country ranking for the journal selection. And a Web of Science way of classifying journals, Q1 and Q2, may be a good option. Now, search techniques, we briefly touched upon it when we were talking about the search protocol. Uh, Keyword searches, where we were looking at, say, deepfake as a term, and then looking at what other keywords are being used along with it. A backward searching, which means you're looking at relevant publications by looking at the reference list of papers that you obtained, and you go back in time to pick up any other articles, more of a citation chaining of sorts. Forward searching, again, you're looking at what articles have cited this, and then you include them as well if they are relevant to the review and the topic that you're reviewing. Now, citation chaining, where there are instances where people have also included gray literature by hand searching, cross-referencing, including relevant articles from authoritative sources. Um, Given, I mean, it typically happens when you have not been able to capture a lot of journal articles, exploratory stage in which the domain or the topic is, where you may want to expand your search criteria. Now, inclusion and exclusion criteria, right? That's important for you to call out very clearly what you've included, what you've excluded. Some examples over here will clarify that for you. Over here, I would like you to pay attention to this, right? So what do they say in this 2022 study? Studies were included if they were focused on how AI can provide business value or how AI is adopted and used in an organizational context. So that clearly sets the stage in terms of what is included, what is not included. Again, over here, they've called out more of in points several inclusion and exclusion criteria, restricting the time span, including only those from ABS Academic Journal Guide, excluding one-rated journals, only peer-reviewed articles, included only empirical research articles, and so on. Now, again, when we discussed in the first session, we were talking about replicability and transparency and scientific approach, right? Now, in terms of assessing the quality, what do how do you establish that? An example from this 2022 paper where they say that two of the co-authors went through the papers independently after the eligibility check. They assessed the quality across several criteria, and two or rather more than one, because you're able to compare and iron out any differences that may exist between the individual assessments. You will notice again in this paper, two of the authors performed the data extraction based on the developed metrics, an iterative process. All co-authors reached a consensus, and this is essential to underscore that the search was comprehensive, was robust, and given that we engaged more than one co-author, there is replicability, there is also clearly called out processes in terms of how you went about it. Now, evaluation parameters, you can take it a few notches higher where you are actually putting in scores for each of the, uh, you're putting a quality evaluation criteria in terms of each paper. If it's a quantitative paper, it scores a +2. If there is no evidence, it doesn't score anything. In terms of relevance of the study, outcomes and challenges, if it's partial, it's a 1.5. If it's a yes, it is a 2, so on. So this way, if you're able to put forth clear quality evaluation criteria and be able to even publish that as part of a table or something, that further establishes as to you've been very thorough in filtering out literature and selecting the final corpus. Now, a step-by-step process, right? So what did we include? What articles were extracted? How was the preliminary screening done? How many were excluded? And a secondary screening as well. There is also the Prisma flowchart. There are several articles that have been written on Prisma. That is, it expands to preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. It is encouraged to follow a Prisma protocol because again, you are registering the study, you're actually going about it in a very systematic manner, following the Prisma guidelines and the flowchart, especially when doing an SLR or even a meta-analysis. So that way, this is another approach that you can definitely take for your reviews. You can go look up for Prisma guidelines. There are several websites and articles which have been written on it that will give you a clear this thing. What I've provided you on the right is more of a templateized version where you can look at how the records were screened and how did we end up finalizing or even selecting the number of studies which form the final corpus. Now, if you're like in the previous session, if you already are going through a review, you could, based on what we have spoken so far, use the learnings from the session to prepare the syntax for your search, or even go back and look at how robust your search syntax is. Extract data using not just Scopus, probably even Web of Science and EBSCO. Look at how you define your inclusion and exclusion criteria. If you want to make changes or if you want to add more, go for it. And prepare a sketch of your flowchart, very similar to the one that we've seen over here or in some of the other articles. So you clearly have called out in a very transparent, replicable way as to how you went about identifying and filtering your articles. A checklist, so you're able to validate. Now, have you chosen the right keywords? Have you supported it with citations? Now, have you called out these inclusion and exclusion criteria? Has the protocol in terms of how you went about the search, has that been defined in a very clear, transparent manner? And when you do the search, when you run the search protocol, does it yield a manageable sample? Or do you want to kind of fine tune it, recalibrate it? All right, so that brings us to an end of the second session. A quick recap. What did we discuss so far? We looked at the search string in terms of how you define your search protocol. We also looked at how you go about identifying a time period for your search. Then we looked at some of the key databases. We did a walkthrough of Scopus, uh, and it's important that you familiarize yourself with Scopus, also Web of Science and EBSCO. And in terms of inclusion and exclusion criteria, we looked at some examples from literature in terms of what goes into including or excluding a particular study in terms of criteria that are clearly called out. Thank you very much.